Ilara didn't know that the man watching her from the shadows of the throne room was the most powerful alpha in the Seven Kingdoms. She didn't know that he had been searching for her face in every crowd, every village, every castle for 20 long years. And she certainly didn't know that when she stumbled into the wrong room with an armful of mended gowns, she had just walked straight into her destiny. The heavy oak doors slammed shut behind her with a finality that made her stomach drop. She pressed herself against the cool stone wall, clutching the silk dresses tighter to her chest. The throne room stretched before her like a cathedral of power, all soaring arches and golden light filtering through stained glass windows. This was wrong. She shouldn't be here. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the empty space, her voice barely carrying in the vast chamber. "I was looking for Lady Vivian's chambers. The guard said exactly what I told them to say." The voice came from the shadows near the throne, deep and rough like distant thunder. Ilara's breath caught in her throat as a figure emerged from the darkness. Tall, impossibly tall. Broad shoulders filled out a black tunic that looked like it cost more than she earned in a year. Dark hair caught the light as he moved, and when he stepped into the golden afternoon sun streaming through the windows, she saw eyes like molten amber fixed directly on her. Heat shot through her chest, sudden and overwhelming. Something pulled tight behind her ribs, like a golden thread being drawn taut. "Your Majesty," she gasped, dropping into the clumsiest curtsy of her life. The dresses scattered across the stone floor in a puddle of blue silk and silver thread. "I didn't know. I was told to bring these to—" "Look at me." The command was gentle, but absolute. Ilara's eyes lifted against her will, meeting his gaze across the space between them. The pull in her chest intensified, like recognition without understanding. He studied her face with an intensity that made her want to run. Every instinct she had developed over 22 years of staying invisible, staying safe, staying small, screamed at her to flee. But her feet remained rooted to the floor as he began to move toward her with predatory grace. "What's your name?" His voice had softened, but the power behind it remained unmistakable. "Ilara, Your Majesty. I work in the seamstress quarters. I mend the ladies' gowns and—" "Ilara." He repeated her name like he was tasting something precious. "How long have you worked in my castle?" 3 years, Your Majesty. I keep to myself. I don't cause trouble, whatever the guards think I've done." "You haven't done anything wrong?" He stopped just beyond arm's reach, close enough that she could see the silver threading through his dark hair, the small scar that cut through his left eyebrow. "Tell me, Ilara, who mends gowns and keeps to herself, where were you born?" The question hit her like a physical blow. "I don't know, Your Majesty. I was found as a baby. My guardian said my parents died of fever." Something flickered in those amber eyes. Pain, maybe, or relief. "You have the wrong person," she said desperately, taking a step backward. The stone wall pressed against her shoulder blades, cold and unyielding. "I'm nobody. I'm nothing. Whatever you're looking for, I'm not." "No." He moved closer, and that strange warmth in her chest blazed hotter. "I've been looking for you." The words landed like a physical caress. Every rational thought in her head evaporated. This was impossible. Kings didn't look for seamstresses. Alphas didn't waste time on bastard orphans who lived in servant quarters and mended other people's beautiful things. But the golden thread behind her ribs pulled tighter, singing with recognition she didn't understand. "That's impossible," she breathed. "Many impossible things happen when fate decides to intervene." He extended his hand toward her, palm up. An invitation, not a command. "Come with me, Ilara. Let me show you who you really are." She stared at his hand like it might burn her. Everything about this moment felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that one step forward would change everything forever. The smart thing would be to refuse, to gather up the scattered dresses, apologize for the intrusion, and disappear back into the safety of her small, invisible life. Instead, she found herself reaching out. The moment their skin touched, lightning raced up her arm and settled somewhere behind her heart like a second heartbeat. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady and impossibly gentle. "There you are," he whispered, and smiled for the first time since she'd stumbled into his throne room. "I knew you'd come home eventually." The private chambers of the Alpha King were nothing like Ilara had imagined. She had expected cold stone and intimidating displays of power. Instead, she found herself in a warm sitting room with deep leather chairs arranged around a crackling fireplace. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, and afternoon light streamed through tall windows that overlooked gardens she had never been allowed to visit. "Sit," Lysander said gently, gesturing to one of the chairs. "You look ready to bolt." She was. Every muscle in her body remained coiled for flight, even as that strange golden warmth continued to pulse in her chest. "Your Majesty, I truly think there's been some mistake. I should return to my duties." "Your duties can wait." He moved to a side table where a servant had left tea and small cakes. His hands were steady as he poured, but she caught the slight tremor in his fingers when he glanced at her. "How much do you know about your past, Ilara?" "Nothing, I told you." She perched on the very edge of the chair, ready to run if this turned into something she couldn't handle. "Mistress Cordelia found me on her doorstep when I was barely walking. She said my parents were plague victims from the outer villages." "Cordelia." He spoke the name like it tasted bitter. "The seamstress who raised you. Tell me about her." Heat flashed across Ilara's cheeks. "She gave me a home when no one else would. I owe her everything." "Do you?" Lysander handed her a delicate porcelain cup, his fingers brushing hers as she took it. That lightning sensation sparked again, stronger this time, and she nearly dropped the tea. "What was your childhood like in her care?" The question hit too close to memories she preferred to keep buried. Long days bent over needlework until her fingers bled. Sleeping in the cold attic while Cordelia entertained her wealthy patrons downstairs. Scraps of food when she finished her work quickly enough. Hunger when she didn't meet expectations. "She taught me a trade," Ilara said carefully. "I learned to sew, to embroider, to make beautiful things." "And did she tell you that you were beautiful?" The question was so unexpected that Ilara nearly choked on her tea. "Your Majesty, I'm a servant. Beauty isn't—" "Answer the question." The gentle command in his voice made her throat tight. "No, she said vanity was a sin, that I should be grateful for honest work and not expect more than I deserved." Something dangerous flickered in those amber eyes. "What do you think you deserve, Ilara?" The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. She had never been asked to consider what she wanted, what she might be worthy of having. The very idea felt like standing too close to a fire. "I deserve what I earn," she whispered, "nothing more." "Look at your wrist." "What?" "Your left wrist. Push back your sleeve." Confused, she set down the teacup and rolled back the rough fabric of her work dress. There, just above her pulse point, was a small birthmark she had carried her entire life. Crescent-shaped, pale as moonlight against her skin. "I've always had this," she said. "It's just a mark. It's the mark of the royal bloodline of Ethermore." His voice was quiet, but the words hit her like thunder. "Every daughter of the Moon Crown bears it. Your great-grandmother had it. Your grandmother. Your mother." The room tilted around her. "That's impossible." 22 years ago, King Aldwyn and Queen Isabella of Ethermore were murdered in their sleep. Lysander moved to the fireplace, staring into the flames. Their infant daughter disappeared the same night. Everyone assumed she died with her parents, the entire royal line wiped out by Duke Aldrich's ambition. "You're saying that I'm—" She couldn't finish the sentence. The idea was too enormous, too impossible. "I'm saying that Cordelia didn't find you on her doorstep by accident." He turned back to her, and she saw something raw in his expression. "I'm saying someone saved you that night and trusted you to a woman who would keep you hidden. Safe. Unknown. Ilara's hands shook as she touched the crescent mark. But I'm nobody. I'm just... You're Princess Ilara of Ethermore, rightful heir to the moon crown, and you're my mate. The words hit her like a physical blow. She surged to her feet, backing toward the door. No! This is insane. You're mistaken. I would know if I were... Would you? He didn't follow her, but his voice carried across the room. What did you feel when you touched my hand? Heat flooded her cheeks. The golden thread behind her ribs pulsed in response to the memory. I don't know what you mean. The bond, Ilara, the connection between fated mates. You felt it the moment we touched. She pressed her back against the door, panic rising in her throat. This is too much. I can't. You're the Alpha King. I mend dresses. Whatever you think you see in me. I see everything. He moved closer, but stopped just out of reach, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. I see a woman who survived 22 years of hiding, who learned to make beautiful things with her hands despite never being told she was beautiful herself, who kept herself small and invisible to stay safe, but couldn't hide the light inside her. Tears burned behind her eyes. You don't understand. I'm not brave or special or worthy of... You're here. His voice was soft, but it stopped her spiral of self-doubt cold. After 20 years of searching every kingdom, following every lead, hoping against hope that my mate survived whatever happened to her family, you walked into my throne room, carrying silk dresses and arguing with my guards. The image would have been funny if she weren't so terrified. What if you're wrong? What if I'm just some orphaned servant girl with a strange birthmark? Then I'll spend however long it takes proving that you're exactly who I've been looking for. He extended his hand again, the same invitation he had made in the throne room. Stay, Ilara, let me show you what it feels like to be treasured instead of tolerated. She stared at his outstretched hand, knowing that taking it would mean stepping into a life she had never dared to imagine. Everything rational told her to run, to return to the safety of her small world where expectations were manageable and heartbreak was impossible. But the golden thread in her chest pulled tight, singing with a recognition that went deeper than thought. I don't know how to be a princess, she whispered. Then it's fortunate that I have all the time in the world to teach you. His smile was gentle, patient, and utterly without pressure. Start by staying for dinner, one meal. If you still want to leave after that, I'll have you escorted back to your chambers with my apologies for the confusion. She looked at his face, searching for deception or manipulation. Instead, she found only warmth and a patience that made something inside her chest crack open like an egg. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and placed her hand in his. The bond flared between them, golden and warm and absolutely undeniable. There you are, he murmured, and this time when he smiled, she almost believed she might be worth finding after all. The days that followed were a strange dream of careful courtship and growing trust. Lysander kept his word about patience, never pushing for more than she could give, never making her feel trapped or overwhelmed. He showed her the castle's hidden passages, shared meals where he asked about her thoughts on everything from trade negotiations to the colour of roses. He listened when she spoke, as if her words mattered, as if her opinions held weight. It was during one of these conversations, 3 days after her world had turned upside down, that the walls around her heart began to crack. They sat by the fireplace in his private study, sharing wine and speaking in quiet voices about nothing and everything. Rain drummed against the windows, creating a cocoon of warmth and intimacy in the flickering candlelight. You're troubled, Ilara observed, studying the tension in his shoulders. In the past few days, she had learned to read the subtle signs of his moods. What weighs on you tonight? Lysander stared into his wine for a long moment before answering. 20 years ago, I failed someone I swore to protect. Something in his voice made her chest ache. The night my parents died. I was supposed to be there. His hands tightened around the goblet. Your father and I were allies, friends despite the distance between our kingdoms. When word came of unrest in Ethermore, I was gathering forces to assist him. I arrived 2 days too late. She had never seen him look so haunted. This powerful man who commanded armies and ruled with absolute authority looked like a boy who had lost everything that mattered. "It wasn't your fault," she said quietly. "I pulled bodies from the rubble of the throne room. Your parents, their guards, servants who had tried to protect the royal quarters. But your body was never found. For 20 years I've wondered if you survived or if you died alone and afraid while I failed to keep my promise." The raw pain in his voice broke something open inside her chest. Without thinking, she reached across the space between their chairs and covered his hand with hers. The moment their skin touched, that golden warmth flared between them, stronger than ever before. But this time, instead of lightning, it felt like coming home. "I'm here now," she whispered. "You found me." He turned his hand palm up, threading their fingers together. "I was beginning to think I never would." "What promise?" she asked, though part of her already knew. "To protect the royal line, to find you if you lived, to—" He met her eyes, and she saw vulnerability there that took her breath away. "To love you as you deserve to be loved." The words hung between them like a bridge neither of them had dared to cross before. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs, torn between the fear that had kept her safe for 22 years and the desperate longing to trust this impossible thing growing between them. "I don't know how to be loved," she admitted, the confession tearing from somewhere deep inside. "Cordelia taught me that love was something to be earned through suffering and service, that asking for more than you deserved was the height of selfishness." "Then she taught you lies." His thumb traced across her knuckles, a touch so gentle it made her want to weep. "Love isn't earned, Ilara. It's given freely, or it isn't love at all." She had never heard anything so beautiful or terrifying in her life. "Show me," she whispered before she could stop herself. He went very still. "Are you certain?" Instead of answering with words, she leaned across the space between them. He met her halfway, his free hand cupping her face as their lips touched for the first time. The kiss was gentle, reverent, nothing like the brutal claiming she had witnessed from the castle's darker corners. This was worship and promise and homecoming all at once. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, and the golden thread between them hummed with new intensity. "Ilara," he breathed against her forehead, "my brave, beautiful girl." She had never been called beautiful. The words sent warmth flooding through her entire body, but their moment of peace shattered as urgent pounding echoed from the study door. "Your Majesty!" Captain Morris's voice was tight with alarm. "Urgent news from the border." Lysander was on his feet instantly, but he kept hold of her hand as he called for the captain to enter. Morris burst through the door, his usually immaculate uniform dishevelled. "Duke Aldrich of Thornwick has crossed into our territory with a company of armed men. He demands an audience regarding a stolen ward." Ice flooded Ilara's veins. She tried to pull her hand free, but Lysander's grip tightened, anchoring her. "What ward?" Lysander's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "He claims the seamstress Cordelia was his employee and that her daughter was taken unlawfully from his care." Morris's eyes flicked to Ilara with growing understanding. "He has documents claiming guardianship?" "No." The word tore from Ilara's throat. Every nightmare from her childhood came flooding back. Cordelia's whispered warnings about the Duke who owned their cottage, who sometimes visited and looked at her with eyes that made her skin crawl. "He can't take me back. He can't and he won't." Lysander's voice carried the absolute authority of an alpha king. "But he's come here knowing exactly who you are, which means someone told him she was found," Morris finished grimly. "Your Majesty, there's more. 3 of our border patrols were found dead this morning, throats torn out, wolf kills, but not from any pack we recognise." Assassins. Lysander's eyes flashed gold, his wolf rising close to the surface. He's not here to retrieve a ward. He's here to finish what he started 22 years ago. Terror clawed at Ilara's throat. She had brought death to his door simply by existing. I have to leave if I'm not here. If you leave, you'll be exactly where he wants you, alone, vulnerable, easy to eliminate. Lysander turned to face her fully, his hands framing her face. I won't let him hurt you, Ilara. I swore an oath 20 years ago to protect you, and I won't break it now. People will die because of me, she whispered, guilt threatening to drown her. People will die if I fail to protect what's mine. His voice was fierce, possessive, and utterly certain. You are not responsible for his evil, love. You're only responsible for choosing whether to trust me to keep you safe. The study door burst open again, this time without ceremony. A young page stumbled in, bleeding from a gash on his forehead. Attack! He gasped. The gardens, armed men. They're already inside the walls. Lysander moved like lightning, positioning himself between Ilara and the door. The change in him was dramatic and immediate. Gone was the patient, gentle man who had courted her with wine and conversation. In his place stood the Alpha King, power radiating from him like heat from a forge. Morris, lockdown protocols, triple guard on all entrances, send word to Commander Hayes to mobilize the pack warriors. His orders came rapid fire, each one delivered with absolute authority. You? He pointed to the page. How many men? 12, maybe more. They're not trying to breach the throne room. They're heading for the residential quarters. They're hunting. Lysander's eyes met Ilara's, and she saw the predator lurking just beneath his human mask. They know exactly where you've been staying. The sound of running feet echoed from the corridor outside, along with shouts and the ring of steel on steel. The attack had reached the main castle. There's something else, the page gasped. The Duke! He's not with them. Word is he's waiting in the Great Hall, demanding to speak with you under flag of parley. While his men try to murder me. Ilara's voice was surprisingly steady, despite the terror coursing through her veins. He wants to keep you talking while they finish the job. Clever girl. Lysander's smile was sharp as a blade. But not clever enough. A new sound reached them through the stone walls, howling, deep, resonant, and absolutely inhuman. Your Majesty, Morris said urgently. Your orders? Lysander looked at Ilara for a long moment, and she saw him making some internal calculation. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made the air itself seem heavier. Full transformation authorization for all pack members, rules of engagement, lethal force approved for any hostile on castle grounds. His eyes never left Ilara's face. Tonight, we end this. And the Duke? The Duke made a fatal error. Lysander's hand found Ilara's, their fingers interlocking. He threatened my mate. There are some lines that once crossed can never be uncrossed. Another howl echoed through the night, closer this time, answered by others until the very stones seemed to vibrate with the sound of an entire pack preparing for war. Stay close to me, Lysander murmured, pressing a fierce kiss to her temple. And Ilara, when this is over, when you're safe and he can never threaten you again, we're going to finish that conversation by the fire. She squeezed his hand, fear and hope warring in her chest. Promise? I promise. His smile was gentle, despite the violence gathering around them. I'll always find my way back to you. The sounds of battle grew closer, but for the first time in her life, Ilara didn't run toward the shadows. Instead, she stood still, holding tight to the hand of the man who had searched for her across kingdoms and through decades, ready to face whatever came next together. The great hall had been transformed into a battlefield disguised as diplomacy. Duke Aldrich stood at the centre of the vast space, flanked by 6 men whose hands rested casually on sword hilts. He was older than Ilara remembered, his silver hair slicked back and his pale eyes cold as winter frost. When she entered beside Lysander, those eyes fixed on her with a hunger that made her skin crawl. "Your Majesty," Aldrich said with a bow that held no respect, "how good of you to receive me so promptly, though I confess surprise at finding my ward in such elevated company." The word ward hit Ilara like a slap. She felt Lysander's hand tighten on hers, felt the controlled fury radiating from his body. "Your ward?" Lysander's voice was deceptively calm. "I was under the impression that Princess Ilara of Ethermore had no living guardians." Aldrich's smile was sharp as glass. "Princess? How ambitious of you, your Majesty, though I suppose even bastard seamstresses can harbour delusions of grandeur." His gaze shifted to Ilara, and she saw something predatory flicker there. "Come here, girl. It's time to go home." "No." The word came from her lips before she could stop it. Every instinct screamed at her to cower, to apologize, to make herself small. Instead, she stepped slightly forward. "I won't go with you." "You will, because you belong to me." Aldrich's voice turned hard as iron. "I have documents proving legal guardianship. Cordelia was my employee, and you were her responsibility. When she died last month, that responsibility transferred to me." The world tilted beneath Ilara's feet. "Cordelia is dead?" "Unfortunate accident. The cottage burned with her inside it." Aldrich's smile was cruel, along with any inconvenient records of your origins. "You killed her." Understanding flooded through Ilara like ice water. "She kept your secret for 22 years, and you murdered her for it. I eliminated a liability." His mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the monster beneath. "Just as I eliminated your parents when they became inconvenient, the throne of Ethermore belongs to me by right of conquest." The admission hung in the air like poison. Around the hall, Lysander's guards shifted, hands moving to weapons. But it was Lysander himself who drew every eye as power began to radiate from him in visible waves. "Interesting confession," Lysander said softly. "Lord Aldrich, Duke of Thornwick, you stand accused of regicide, conspiracy, murder, and treason against the crown of Ethermore. How do you answer?" "I answer that might makes right, Wolf King." Aldrich signalled his men, who drew steel in perfect unison. "And I have more might than one aging alpha and his bastard whore." The insult hit its mark. Lysander's eyes flashed gold, and for a heartbeat Ilara saw something vast and terrible lurking just beneath his human facade. Trial by combat, then. Lysander's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Your life against mine, with Princess Ilara's freedom as the prize." "Gladly." Aldrich drew his own sword, the blade gleaming with an oily sheen that spoke of poison. "When you're dead, I'll finish what I started in her nursery 22 years ago." The circle formed quickly, courtiers and guards backing away to create an arena in the centre of the hall. Ilara found herself pressed against the far wall, her heart hammering as she watched the two men who would decide her fate face each other with naked steel. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" Aldrich called to her as he circled Lysander like a shark. "To be fought over like a prize? To have men die for the honour of your company?" "Leave her out of this," Lysander growled, and Ilara heard the wolf in his voice. "Why? She's the reason we're here." Aldrich lunged without warning, his poisoned blade seeking Lysander's heart. The fight was brutal and swift. Lysander moved like liquid lightning, every motion precise and deadly. But Aldrich fought like a man with nothing left to lose, and the poison on his blade made every cut potentially fatal. "You're growing slow, Wolf King," Aldrich taunted as his sword opened a line of fire across Lysander's ribs. 20 years of soft living have made you weak. 20 years of patience have made me wise." Lysander's return strike nearly took Aldrich's arm off at the shoulder. "I know the difference between prey and predator." But even as he spoke, Ilara could see the poison working. Lysander's movements were growing sluggish, his breathing laboured. Black veins were spreading from the wound on his side, and his skin had taken on a grey pallor. "Lysander!" The scream tore from her throat before she could stop it. That moment of distraction was all Aldrich needed. His blade sliced deep across Lysander's thigh, sending the Alpha King to one knee. "Any last words, Your Majesty?" Aldrich raised his sword for the killing blow. Something snapped inside Ilara's chest. The golden thread that had connected her to Lysander since that first touch suddenly blazed like a star, and power flooded through her veins like liquid fire. "Lysander!" she called again, but this time her voice carried something more than fear. It carried command, healing, the absolute certainty that he would not die while she drew breath. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Colour flooded back into Lysander's face, the black veins receded, and his eyes blazed with renewed strength. He surged to his feet just as Aldrich's blade descended, catching the Duke's wrist and twisting until bones snapped like kindling. "Impossible!" Aldrich gasped. The Moon Crown's power died with the royal line. "The royal line stands before you," Lysander said quietly. Then his voice rose, carrying to every corner of the hall. "Behold Ilara, daughter of Aldwin and Isabella, rightful queen of Ethermore and my chosen mate." The transformation that followed was nothing short of magical. Lysander's human facade melted away like mist, revealing the true Alpha in all his terrible glory. He grew larger, more powerful, his eyes blazing gold as partial shift rippled through his frame. When he struck, it was with the strength of the wolf and the precision of the man. Aldrich's poisoned blade shattered against Lysander's bare hand. The Duke fell to his knees, blood streaming from wounds too numerous to count. "You lose," Lysander said simply. "Kill me then," Aldrich spat, "but know that others will come. She'll never be safe. The bastard princess will spend her life running from shadows and—" "No." Ilara stepped into the circle, power still singing in her veins. "I'm done running." She looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of every person present. Nobles, guards, servants, all of them watching her with mixtures of awe and fear. "I am Ilara, daughter of King Aldwin and Queen Isabella of Ethermore," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "I am the last of the Moon Crown bloodline, and I claim my birthright not through conquest, but through choice." Her gaze found Lysander, and she saw pride blazing in his golden eyes. "I choose to stand with the Alpha King as his equal, his partner, his mate. I choose to build rather than destroy, to heal rather than harm." She turned back to Aldrich, who was staring at her in shock. "And I choose mercy over vengeance. You will be imprisoned for your crimes, not executed. Perhaps in time you'll understand the difference between ruling through fear and leading through love." "You think mercy makes you strong?" Aldrich laughed bitterly. "You're weak, just like your parents. Then you understand nothing about true strength." Lysander's hand found hers, their fingers interlocking as that golden bond flared between them. "Captain Morris, remove the prisoner. See that he's given medical attention and a cell befitting his former rank." As the guards dragged Aldrich away, he called back one final threat. "This isn't over, bastard princess. Others know you live now. They'll come." "Let them come," Lysander said quietly, but his words carried to every corner of the hall. "They'll find her protected by an Alpha King, defended by the combined might of 2 kingdoms, and crowned as my queen." Then, before the entire court, he dropped to one knee before her. "Ilara of Ethermore," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "will you do me the honour of becoming my wife, my queen, my partner in all things?" The hall fell silent as death. She looked down at this magnificent, powerful man kneeling before her, offering her not just his crown, but his heart. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, I will." When he stood and kissed her, the hall erupted in cheers that seemed to shake the very foundations of the castle. But all Ilara could hear was the thundering of her own heart and the whispered words he spoke against her lips. "My brave, beautiful queen, mine always." "Yours," she whispered back, "always and forever." The golden thread between them blazed like a sun, binding them together in ways that went deeper than blood, stronger than magic, more enduring than time itself. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of transformation and healing. Ilara woke each morning in chambers fit for a queen, sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked gardens she was now free to explore. The first few days had been overwhelming. Servants who once barely acknowledged her existence now bowed when she passed. Nobles sought audiences for matters she was still learning to understand, and seamstresses arrived daily with bolts of silk for gowns she had never imagined wearing. But it was the quiet moments with Lysander that truly changed her. "You're thinking too hard again," he murmured against her temple as they shared breakfast on the balcony overlooking the rose gardens. 2 weeks had passed since Aldrich's defeat, and she was still adjusting to the luxury of leisurely mornings. "The Council of Lords wants to discuss trade agreements with the merchant guilds," she said, picking at her pastries. "Lord Hurrick seems to think I should defer all decisions to you, while Lady Morven insists I take a stronger stance on tariffs." "And what do you think?" The question still surprised her, even after dozens of similar conversations. In her old life, her thoughts had mattered to no one. Now, the Alpha King of the most powerful kingdom in the realm asked for her opinion on everything, from crop rotations to diplomatic alliances. "I think," she said carefully, "that the merchants are already struggling with the increased security costs from border patrols. Adding tariffs would hurt the common people more than it helps the crown." Lysander smiled, the expression warm with pride. "The council meets in an hour. Would you like to present that position yourself?" "You trust me to speak for both our kingdoms?" The idea still felt too large, too impossible. "I trust you to speak for our people." His hand covered hers, the simple touch sending that familiar golden warmth through her chest. "You understand their struggles in ways I never could. You've lived them." It was true. Her years in the servants' quarters had taught her things no royal education could provide. She knew what it felt like to choose between warm clothing and sufficient food, to work until your fingers bled because the alternative was hunger. That knowledge informed every decision she made now. The afternoon brought visitors, refugees from Ethermore who had come to meet the lost princess they had thought dead for over 2 decades. An elderly woman named Martha had served in the royal nursery, and she wept when she saw the crescent birthmark that proved Ilara's identity beyond doubt. "You look so much like your mother," Martha whispered, touching Ilara's face with trembling hands. "But you have your father's eyes, kind eyes, strong eyes." "Tell me about them," Ilara asked softly. "I want to know who they were." The stories that followed painted pictures of parents she had never known, but somehow recognized. A king who walked among his people during harvest time, helping to bring in crops. A queen who personally tended wounded soldiers and opened the castle during plagues to shelter the sick. Leaders who had loved their kingdom and their people more than their own comfort. "They would be so proud," Martha said through her tears. "To see you alive, to see you chosen by such a man, to know their bloodline will continue in strength." That evening, Lysander found her in the library, curled in a chair with a history of Ethermore open in her lap. "Learning about your heritage?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. "Trying to understand what I've inherited." She closed the book and looked at him. "It's overwhelming, knowing that an entire kingdom's future depends on decisions I make. Not decisions you make alone." He reached over to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "We're partners in this, remember? Your kingdom and mine, ruling together." The word partner still sent warmth flooding through her. Not subject and ruler, not servant and master, but equals building something together. "There's something I need to tell you," she said quietly, "about what happened during the fight with Aldrich." His attention sharpened. The healing power? It wasn't just healing. She turned to face him fully. "When I saw you falling, when I thought I might lose you, something inside me awakened. I could feel every person in that hall, their hearts, their fears, their loyalties. For just a moment I could have commanded them all." "The moon crown's gift," Lysander said softly. "Your grandmother was said to have the same ability, the power to inspire absolute loyalty, to heal not just bodies, but spirits." It terrified me. The admission came out in a whisper. That much power, over people's very will. How do I ensure I never abuse it? By asking that question? His smile was gentle. Power corrupts those who seek it for its own sake. You fear it because you understand its weight. That's exactly the quality that makes you worthy to wield it. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire crackle in the hearth. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, the first of the winter season. "I had another letter from Lord Commander Hayes today," Lysander said eventually. "The reconstruction of Ethermore's capital is ahead of schedule. The people are eager for their queen to come home." Home. She tested the word, finding it strange on her tongue. "I've never had a real home before." "You have one now, here with me, there in the kingdom of your birth, wherever we choose to build our life together." He stood and offered her his hand. "Speaking of which, there's something I want to show you." He led her through corridors she had never explored, up a winding stair to a tower room she didn't know existed. When he opened the door, she gasped. The chamber was filled with easels, holding detailed architectural drawings, plans for a palace, but unlike any she had ever seen. This one had large windows on every floor, servants' quarters that rivaled noble chambers in other castles, and common spaces designed for interaction between all social classes. "A palace for the people," Lysander explained, watching her study the drawings. "Built for a queen who understands that true strength comes from serving those you rule, not from standing above them. You designed this for me. I designed it for us." He moved to stand behind her, his arms encircling her waist. "A place where children from the lowest village can come to petition their queen directly, where no one sleeps in cold attic rooms or goes hungry while others feast." Tears blurred her vision as she looked at the careful details he had included. Gardens for growing food that would be distributed freely. Workshops where anyone could learn trades. Libraries open to all who wish to read. "It's perfect," she breathed. "When do we begin construction?" "After the wedding." His lips brushed her neck, sending shivers down her spine. "I thought you might want to honeymoon in your ancestral lands while the builders work." "Our wedding." The words still felt surreal. "I keep expecting to wake up back in my attic room, expecting this all to be some impossible dream. If it's a dream, then I'm dreaming it too." He turned her in his arms, and she saw her own wonder reflected in his golden eyes. "Ilara, do you know what you've given me?" "What?" "Purpose." His hands framed her face with infinite gentleness. "For 20 years I ruled because I had to. I was strong because weakness meant chaos. I made decisions because someone had to make them, but I never had a reason beyond duty." His thumbs traced her cheekbones. "You gave me something worth building toward, a future worth fighting for, love worth everything I am." The words broke her heart open in the best possible way. She rose on her toes to kiss him, pouring everything she couldn't say into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. "I love you," she whispered. "I never thought I'd be brave enough to say those words to anyone, but you make me brave." "You were brave long before you met me," he murmured back. "You survived 22 years of hiding and cruelty and still kept your heart open enough to love. That's the strongest thing I've ever seen." They stayed in the tower room until the fire burned low, planning their future with the architectural drawings spread around them like promises. When they finally returned to his chambers, their chambers now, Ilara felt something she had never experienced before: complete and utter peace. She belonged here with this man who saw all her scars and called her beautiful. She belonged to herself, finally free to choose her own path. And she belonged to something larger, 2 kingdoms that needed the kind of leadership that came from understanding struggle, from remembering what it meant to be powerless. As she fell asleep in Lysander's arms, snow falling gently outside their window, Ilara smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new opportunities to prove herself worthy of the trust placed in her. But tonight she was simply a woman in love, warm and safe and home at last. 1 year later, the great cathedral of Lysander's kingdom had never looked more magnificent. Flowers from both realms adorned every pillar: white roses for purity, golden marigolds for the sun crown, and silver moonbells for the ancient bloodline of Ethermore. The entire space glowed with warm candlelight and the soft radiance of magic that seemed to emanate from the very stones. Ilara stood before the mirror in the cathedral's private chamber, barely recognizing the woman looking back at her. The wedding gown was a masterpiece of silk and moonstone, recreated from portraits of her mother's own wedding dress, but altered to fit her perfectly. The moon crown sat upon her dark hair, its ancient silver warm against her skin, as if it recognized its rightful owner. "You look exactly as a queen should," Martha said softly, adjusting the veil that had belonged to 7 generations of Ethermore royalty. "Like you were born to wear these jewels." "I feel like I'm about to jump off a cliff," Ilara admitted, though her smile was radiant. "The best adventures begin that way." Lady Morven stepped forward with a small blue ribbon. "Something borrowed from your new kingdom. It belonged to Lysander's mother." As they finished the traditional preparations, Ilara caught sight of herself in the full mirror and felt a moment of pure wonder. A year ago, she had been a seamstress who mended other people's beautiful things. Today, she was a queen about to marry the love of her life. The cathedral doors opened to reveal an impossible sight. Every pew was filled with people from both kingdoms, nobles and commoners sitting side by side, children from the villages she had visited during her year of preparation, waving enthusiastically from the front rows. This wasn't just a royal wedding. It was a celebration of unity between 2 peoples who had found hope in an unexpected love story. When the music began, Ilara walked alone down the aisle, as she had chosen to do. She had no father to give her away, but she needed none. This was her choice, made freely and with a full heart. Lysander stood at the altar in deep blue and gold, but it was his expression that took her breath away. Pure joy, unwavering love, and something that looked suspiciously like grateful tears. "Dearly beloved," the priest began, "we gather today to witness the union of 2 hearts, 2 kingdoms, and 2 souls who have found in each other what the ancient prophecies promised: perfect balance." The vows they had written together were simple, but profound. "Lysander," Ilara said, her voice clear and strong, "you found me when I was lost, not just in place but in spirit. You saw worth in me when I saw none in myself. You offered me not just your crown, but your patience, your protection, and your heart. Today I choose you not because fate decreed it, but because loving you has made me more myself than I ever thought possible." "Ilara," Lysander replied, his deep voice carrying to every corner of the cathedral, "you taught me that true strength isn't about power over others, but about lifting others up. You showed me that the greatest victories come not from conquest, but from building something beautiful together. You chose to trust me with your heart despite every reason to guard it, and that trust has transformed me utterly." When they exchanged rings, his bearing the wolf of his house, hers combining the moon and wolf in eternal circle, the golden thread that had connected them since their first meeting blazed so brightly that several sensitive souls in the audience gasped at the visible manifestation of their bond. "By the power vested in me by both kingdoms and the ancient laws that govern the mating of alphas," the priest declared, "I pronounce you husband and wife, king and queen, mates for all eternity." The kiss that followed was soft, reverent, and absolutely perfect. When they turned to face their people as joint rulers, the roar of approval seemed to shake the very foundations of the cathedral. The celebration that followed was unlike anything either kingdom had ever seen. Tables stretched through the castle's great halls and spilled into the courtyards, laden with food from both realms. Music played late into the night, and Ilara danced with everyone from visiting kings to the stable boys who had taught her to ride during her year of royal preparation. But it was near midnight, as they finally escaped to the privacy of their chambers, that the moment she treasured most occurred. "How do you feel, Your Majesty?" Lysander asked, using her new title with playful formality as he helped her out of the elaborate crown. "Like the luckiest woman in all the kingdoms," she answered honestly, "and terrified that I'll wake up to find this was all an impossible dream." "Then let me give you something to prove it's real." He disappeared into his dressing room and returned with a small wrapped package. Inside was a simple leather journal, its pages blank and ready for writing. "What's this for?" "Our story," he said softly. "I want you to write it all down. How we met, how we fell in love, how we built this life together. Not the official royal chronicle that historians will write, but the real story. The one about a seamstress who turned out to be a queen and a lonely king who learned what it meant to be truly chosen." Tears filled her eyes as she understood the gift he was giving her. "You want me to write our truth. I want our children to know that their parents' love story was real, that their mother was the bravest, strongest, most magnificent woman who ever lived, and that their father spent 20 years searching for her because he knew she was worth finding." "Children?" The word came out as barely a whisper. His hand moved to rest gently against her still flat stomach, and his smile was radiant. "I was hoping you might have noticed by now. The palace physician confirmed it this morning." The world seemed to stop turning. "We're having a baby." "We're having a baby!" His voice was full of wonder. "A little prince or princess who will grow up knowing they are loved, wanted, and worthy of every good thing this world has to offer." The tears came freely then, but they were tears of pure joy. Everything she had never dared to dream was coming true. 2 years later, Princess Isabella, named for her grandmother but called Bella by those who loved her, took her first steps in the gardens of the new palace. She toddled between her parents with determination that reminded everyone of her mother's spirit and a laugh that echoed her father's joy. Ilara sat on a blanket in the afternoon sunshine, watching Lysander chase their daughter through the flower beds while she worked on the final pages of their story. The journal was nearly full now, chronicling not just their romance but the rebuilding of 2 kingdoms, the establishment of schools and hospitals, and the gradual healing of old wounds. "Mama, read story," Bella demanded, climbing into Ilara's lap with grass stains on her little dress and flowers in her dark hair. "Which story would you like?" Ilara asked, though she already knew the answer. "Princess story, about Mama and Papa." So Ilara opened the journal to the first page and began, "Once upon a time there was a seamstress who didn't know she was a princess." As she read, Lysander settled beside them, his arm around her waist and his free hand resting on the gentle curve of her stomach where their second child grew. The afternoon sun painted everything golden, and the air was filled with the scent of roses and the sound of their daughter's delighted giggles. "And they lived happily ever after," Ilara concluded, closing the journal. "More," Bella demanded. "Tell more story." "That's all the story there is, little love," Lysander said, kissing the top of his daughter's head. "No," Bella said firmly. "More story every day, more story tomorrow." Ilara met Lysander's eyes over their daughter's head and saw the same understanding there. Bella was right. Their story didn't end with happily ever after. It continued every day, in every choice they made, every problem they solved together, every moment of love they shared. "You're absolutely right," Ilara told her daughter. "More story every day." That evening, as they put Bella to bed in the nursery that connected to their chambers, she asked her favourite question. "Mamma, "Why did Papa look for you?" "Because," Ilara said, tucking the blankets around her precious girl. "Sometimes the most important people come into our lives when we need them most, and sometimes, if we're very lucky, we recognize them when they arrive." "Will someone look for me some day?" "Oh, my darling," Lysander said, settling into the chair beside her bed. "By the time you're grown, you'll be so magnificent that the whole world will be looking for you. But you won't need anyone to find you. You'll already know exactly who you are and what you're worth." "Because I'm a princess." "Because you're you," Ilara said simply, "brave and kind and absolutely perfect, just as you are." Later, when they were alone in their own chambers, Ilara turned to the man who had searched for her across kingdoms and through decades. "Do you ever regret it," she asked, "choosing me over all the noble ladies who would have been easier choices?" "Never." His answer was immediate and absolute. "You weren't the easy choice, love. You were the only choice. You were always the only choice. Even when I argued with you about tax policies in front of the entire council? Especially then." His laugh was warm as summer rain. "I fell in love with a seamstress who saw beauty in broken things and knew how to make them whole again. That I got to marry a queen was just an extraordinary bonus." As they fell asleep that night, snow beginning to dust the window-sills and their unborn child moving gently beneath Ilara's heart, she reflected on the impossible journey that had brought them here. She had been wrong about being the wrong person. She had been exactly the right person, at exactly the right time, in exactly the right place. Not because of prophecy or destiny or the will of the gods, but because love, real love, saw past surfaces to the truth underneath. And the truth was simple. They had chosen each other, every single day, in 1,000 small ways and several dramatic ones. They would keep choosing each other tomorrow and the day after, and for all the days of their lives. That was the real magic. Not the moon crown's power or the strength of the wolf, but the daily decision to build something beautiful together. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "Forever," came his sleepy reply. "Always and forever." Outside their window, the first snow of winter fell gently on the kingdom they had built together. A realm where love mattered more than bloodlines, where worth was measured in kindness rather than conquest, and where even seamstresses could become queens if they were brave enough to believe they deserved to be found.